Pastor has given me to be here, and always love coming to Norwich. What an incredible fellowship we have. I saw you were seeing the memorial stones this morning, and you know what, to be a part of this fellowship is a great thing, and I really do appreciate being here and just giving a bit more of a testimony tonight. You know, God had to take me all the way from England to Australia to get me saved, because there was no church in England that could contain me. And so I needed the Potter's house, and there weren't many Potter's houses in England at that time. And so, but it's been great to be here, and I'm sure your pastor's having a great time there in the Australian conference. I was thinking about a time, a very good friend of mine, I won't mention his name, but he went to the Australian conference, and as he's standing there, Pastor Mitchell spotted him, and Pastor Mitchell was all excited and came running over to my friend, and he said, "Wow," he goes, "you made it all the way to Australia. It's so good to see you." He was animated, and Pastor Mitchell Senior, this isn't Greg Mitchell, this is Pastor Wayman Mitchell, he's animated. "It's so good to see you. Hang on a second. And he ran off, and he got his wife Nelma, and he brought her over and said, "You know what, look, Peter Ajala's here." And his wife said, "That's not Peter Ajala." And so Pastor Mitchell went, "Oh," and just turned around and walked away. You know, we mocked this guy. I won't say who it was, but we mocked him. Sometimes they call it the mocker's house, not the potter's house. And I do love a bit of mockery. You have to be careful with it. But so we mocked him, and he was so embarrassed about, you know, I never knew. I don't know, who are you? I don't even know who you are. I think you're someone else. And this sermon is entitled, "I Never Knew You." Matthew 7, verse 21. How many people have had embarrassing situations like that? A good friend of my son's is the 400-meter world champion, Wade Vanderkerk. And, you know, he ran with my son. He's got the world. He holds the world record in 400 meters. He's an Olympic champion. And so this guy's, you know, he's a bit of a celebrity in South Africa. And I remember seeing Wade at the school. And I went up to him and said, "Hey, Wade, how you going?" And again, he said, "Sorry, who are you?" And I had to say, "I'm Jordan's dad." And he goes, "Jordan who?" And so, yeah, it's embarrassing sometimes, isn't it? But Matthew 7, verse 21, "Not everyone who says to me, 'Lord, Lord,' shall enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father in heaven. Many will say to me in that day, 'Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in your name, cast out demons in your name, and done many wonders in your name?' And then I will declare to them, 'I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness.'" This is an incredibly sobering thought. And if you notice in that scripture, it's saying, "Those who prophesied in my name, those who have cast out demons in your name." You know, most of the people who do that are pastors. And I wonder how many pastors are going to stand before God on that great day when we stand before him, and he's going, "You know, you might have been a pastor, but I don't know you." And that's what I want to talk about today, is actually knowing Jesus. You know what? That one's going to be very embarrassing. When we stand before God and we're expecting to go into heaven, and I was the pastor of the church, and I've done this and I've done that. And when God says to you, "Sorry, I don't know you," because the only way you get into heaven is by knowing, having a relationship with Jesus Christ. And you know what? He says you will depart to a place of wailing and gnashing of teeth. Uncontrollable sorrow. I remember seeing on the news, there was a story about someone called Tegrin Morris. And Tegrin Morris had fallen out of the car. I can't remember the whole scenario around that, but he'd fallen out of a car and got caught on the seatbelt around his foot. And the car had traveled down the road, and the mum's sitting there watching her son being dragged down the road and ends up dying. I mean, can you imagine the sorrow? Any parents, the grief that you would to see your son dragged behind a car, and there's nothing that you can do. Just this week in the news, there was a story about a father who was, I think it was in America, and they were building tunnels in the sand. And as they were building the tunnels in the sand, the tunnel collapsed on top of his daughter. And there's 20 minutes, they had the recording when they phoned 911, and they had the recording of this parent absolutely frantic, beside themselves. "My daughter is stuck behind underneath this pile of sand, and she perished." Or imagine the MH17, Malaysian Airways. I don't know if you remember that story. I'm a bit older these days, so all my stories are a bit older. But this plane just disappeared. And they showed the scene at the airport where the plane was meant to land, where loved ones were coming to meet their love, to meet the people off the plane. And when the plane landed, the news had broken. This plane has gone missing, and most people were feared dead on that plane. And they showed the video, they showed the footage in the airport of people wailing and gnashing of teeth. Sometimes we hear about hell and we go, yeah. But it's a horrible place. What would you do if you had foretold about something like that? I mean, what would that mother have done knowing that her son was going to be dragged down the road by the seatbelt? I know what I'd have done. I'd have got the knife and I'd have cut that seatbelt out of the car so that could never have possibly happened. Or, I wouldn't have got on the plane. No, I'm not getting on that plane. Pastor Alan Jenkins many years ago was due to fly on that Pan Am flight that went to New York, I think it was. He was going and he was late for the airport and they didn't get on the plane, Lockerbie disaster. And he was meant to be on that plane, but because of some unforeseen circumstances, he couldn't get that plane and he missed that flight and he was vexed. But about an hour and a half later, he wasn't vexed anymore. He thinks, thank God I wasn't on that plane. And so what would you do to avert a disaster, to avert that wailing and gnashing of teeth? What would you do? Refuse to fly if you'd known? But you know what? As we stand here today, we have been warned. And there is an emergency that's about to happen. And you can see the signs around us. You can see what's going to happen. Jesus is coming back. And many Christians are going to be taken up to be with him. And that's going to cause all kinds of disasters because people have been driving cars, people have been flying planes. In fact, Pan Am never used to allow 2 born-again Christians to be pilots on their planes because that plane would be out of control. And there's going to be all kinds of madness that's going to carry on. There is an emergency about to happen. And there is a separation that is going to happen. Matthew 25, verse 31 says, when the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the holy angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory and all the nations will be gathered before him and he will separate one from another as a shepherd divides his sheep from the goats. And he will set the sheep on his right hand, but the goats on the left hand. Then the king will say to those on his right hand, come, you blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundations of the world. There's a separation coming. And that's going to be a very exciting time and a very devastating time. Many church kids, Josh, Gabriel, has come back to our church just recently. And one of the things that brought him back to church was the thought of, and I'm sure many church kids have had that, where you think, hang on a second, I think the rapture's happened and there's no Christians around and Jesus has come back and I've been left behind, and that thought that I've been separated. And one of the things that caused Josh Gabriel to get saved again was the thought that I would be separated from my parents and I would be separated and I would not be going to heaven. And I'll be talking a little bit about that. That's what got me saved in the first place, was the thought of going to hell, going to heaven. Philippians 2 verse 12 says, therefore, my beloved, as you have always obeyed, not as in my presence only, but how much more in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. I know that nothing can separate us from the love of God. And so we can be very secure in our salvation. But there is no outside force that can separate you from the love of God or take away your salvation from you. It can't be stolen from you. So we can be secure in our salvation. But you can lose your salvation through neglect. You can lose it. The only thing that can take your salvation from you is you. And that very often isn't you're in gross sin or anything like that. Work is the opposite of neglect. And if you do nothing with your salvation, you will lose it. I've seen so many people get gloriously saved, give their life to Jesus, turn from their ways, change their life around, and then they do nothing with their salvation. They just sit there, do nothing. But here the Bible says, work out. So it's not by works, don't get me wrong, it's not by works, not by the works you do, but you need to work out your salvation. And there's a lot that God does in us. There's a lot that God works in us. And you need to work out your salvation with fear and trembling. You know, as I look back over my life, I can't believe that life is going so quickly. 62 years old now. I still feel like a 30-year-old. People ask me, how old are you? I was like, no. 60, I mean, I remember when we were a young fellowship. And it's good to see so many young people coming into the fellowship. It's a wonderful thing. That's the next generation. But, you know, we're facing something we've never faced, which is having oldies in our church. And I'm one of the oldies in the church. I used to be one of the young guys in the church, 26 years old. But I look back over my life, and there are some relationships that I wish I had cultivated. You know, you meet so many people. There's so many wonderful people that we meet in church, in workplaces, and this sort of thing, and you kind of just neglect those relationships. You move on. You don't bother with the phone calls. You know, people don't like to talk anymore, do they? I remember I did a job just about a year ago. I was doing a job, and I'd phone people, and they'd say, "What are you doing phoning me? Don't phone me. Send me an email." So I don't do emails. I talk. And we have a generation now where, you know, they don't want to talk anymore. It's like, pick the phone up and talk. Hey, you know, I've got a problem, but no, send me an email. Okay, that email will go out, and it will sit there for 3 hours on your desk, and then just before the end of the day, when I've gone home, you'll answer the email, and then I won't get it till tomorrow. You know, it could have been really easy just to pick up the phone and say, hey, listen, what's going on? Can we do this? No, we can't do it, whatever. And it's done. But no, nowadays, we're all text messages and emails, and people don't like to phone anymore. I've got some friends who are in Australia, and I phone them and go, wait, and it's almost like it's an inconvenience. You're phoning me. And I'm thinking, are we friends? Because people don't want to talk anymore. And I think we're losing something. You know, it's good to talk. You can get the inclinations. You can see the tone. You know, it's so good to talk. I love to talk. But there's some friendships I wish I'd cultivated. I wish I'd worked out those friendships. I wish I hadn't neglected those friends. I wish I hadn't been so distant, because we're not friends any longer. And you see them, you go, hey, and it's like they walk past, you go, wow. There's this new thing they call ghosting. And people just ignore you, and it's like, and that's through neglect. When you go through just the motions of church, you know, I'm trying to be a good person, but you neglect the building of your relationship with God. You know, God is always at work in building his relationship with you. He's always working at building his relationship. And you can end up with the packaging. You look like a Christian package. You are the whole package. You've got everything in place. You come to church, you know, dressed up, you know, you follow all the rules, you do everything you should do, you know, you lift your hands at the right time, you come down the altar, you do everything you should do, because we've learned how to package our lives. But you have no content. You've got all the packaging. You know what to do, but you don't have a content. There's no relationship with Jesus Christ, and we can become churchified, where you have no relationship with God. And that is neglect. And that's the relationship you need to work on. We had a guy come to our church for a whole year, and he slipped through the net. We all just assumed, you know, he's saved. He lifted his hands, he gave his tithes, he was faithful, he came on outreach. But you know, he'd never got born again, and one day he put his hand up at the altar call, came down to the front, and got saved. And we're all going, when did you backslide? He goes, I've never backslid. I've never got born again. He'd literally come to our church, and he was just such a nice person. Everyone just assumed he was saved, and the church had got bigger. And you know, we didn't know everyone like we used to in the old days, when we knew everybody in church. We knew when they flicked their ears or whatever they did. We knew everything about them. But this guy come into the church, and he was faithful, and he wasn't born again. How many people know the Bible says unless a man is born again, he cannot enter the kingdom of God? It's about being born again. And if he died, let me ask you a question. If he died, where would he have gone? because he'd never, ever surrendered his heart to Jesus Christ. He'd never got saved. And so he was doing all the things. He would even stand up and hold the offering bowl, close in prayer. He did all those things. And yet he wasn't saved. He was religious. And you know, one of the things I hate the most in life is religion. It stinks. Where you do things for all the wrong reasons. You're religious. You do all the religious things, but you have no relationship. You can go through all the motions of being a Christian, but not actually have a relationship with God. And that's what being a Christian is. It's about having a relationship with Jesus. And you know what? The only person that can really know you is God. You know, I was accused when I was in South Africa of being the doorkeeper to heaven. And people would say to me, I said, you know, bro, if you carry on like that, you're not going to heaven. He goes, oh, who are you? Are you the doorkeeper to heaven? I am not the doorkeeper to heaven. But I am concerned that people will go to heaven. And they would accuse me, you're the doorkeeper. I don't know. The only person that knows whether you're going to heaven or not is God and yourself. I could be a total fake standing up here this morning. I could be in wicked sin. My first pastor was. For 4 years, he was in a wicked sin. He was a fornicator. He was probably one of the best preachers in our fellowship at the time. He was incredible. And yet he'd stand up here, every service he'd stand up, he'd lift his hands. We had incredible revival through him. And yet he's a fake. Actors. In fact, we had one come to our church again. He went right to the top. He was just about to be sent out. He was about, that next conference, he was going out. And one day he stood up and said, I never believed. I came to this church because I saw someone at work who told me the only way they could date me is if I came to church and got saved. And so I came to church, I got saved, never believed it. I dated the woman, she became my wife. I played the game. I got the girl. We had 2 children, but I never believed, and I still don't believe, and I'm leaving the church, my wife, and my 2 kids. And he walked out of church. He never, ever believed, and we were about to send him out to be a pastor. You know, you can be a fake. You can do all the right things. Bye-bye. And you know what? They've never seen him again. Gone. Actually, they did see him on television because now he's an actor on television. and you know, his best acting role was being in the Potter's House as a pretender. But at least he stopped pretending. You know, I'd rather be honest. I'd rather be, this is who I really am. Stop pretending. I wonder how many people in church are just pretending. You've got a secret life of sin. You know, even sinners know what's right and wrong. And why can't I do that? Why can't you come down for a beer? Well, I don't drink. Oh, you can't do this, you can't do this. You know, and sinners will tell you what you shouldn't do. When you do it, they say, you shouldn't be doing that. I thought you were a Christian. You can have a secret life of sin. You can do whatever you want to do. You can be out there. I don't know what you did last night. You can live a double life in church. You're one thing at church, but at home, at work, back where you came from, you're something completely different. You know, you can't fool God. And to be honest with you, the only person you're fooling is yourself. And one thing I've come to understand is the need to be transparent. You know what? Just be honest who you are. One thing, I can't be a fake. And sometimes being transparent gets you into trouble. You know, I always say what's on my mind, and maybe I shouldn't say what's on my mind, because when I say what's on my mind, it's like what's on my mind isn't good. And it's like, I shouldn't have said that. It's like, oh, I wish I could take that back. But at least I'm being transparent. I need to be transparent and wise sometimes. And you know what? We love to hide our faults, don't we? And one thing that church does, it highlights your faults. You come to church and God starts to pinpoint you. And your faults are like so heightened. I remember the first time I ever felt conviction. And I remember sitting over there in the church, and it's like in Darwin, and this guy's preaching. I'm thinking, why don't you just put my face on the screen? Why don't you just, you just outed me. I feel so embarrassed. I'm bright red. My ears, us white people, our ears go red. My ears are purple. I'm so embarrassed, and it's like my ears are throbbing because I'm so embarrassed. Like everybody in this church must know what I've been doing. And I couldn't wait to depart in the altar. I come to the altar and I said, God, I repent. I was exposed. But that exposure was such a good thing because God brought it to the surface. And I don't want to be like that. And God says, I forgive you for being like that. And it was taken away from me. We cover our faults. We like to hide our faults. And when we get exposed, the first thing we do is cover up. We put on a mask. And I wonder how many people have got masks on. You come to church and you pretend to be something. You're the great pretenders. You pretend you're all holier than thou. You know what? That's religion. Don't pretend. Just be who you are. Let God expose you. Let God work it out. And what we do, though, when we're exposed, we go into cover-up mode. What does the Bible say? James 5, verse 16. Confess your trespasses to one another and pray for one another that you may be healed. The effective, fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much. See, the problem with the generation that we have these days is we're loners. We don't talk on the phone anymore. We send messages. We don't really get into fellowship like we used to or how we should do. We don't really open up to anybody. You need to have someone that you can open up to. You need to have someone in your life that you can be transparent with, that they know all your ins and outs. Be careful who you choose. But it says, confess your trespasses to one another. And you need to have friends that will pray for you. Or I'm going to pray for you. But when you cover your faults, if you cover up damp in a wall, you can scrape it all off. You can cover it over with some filler. Then you can paint that wall, but I'm telling you, within a year, that wall is going to be bubbling all out again. It's going to be festering. It's going to come back as worse. Now the brick's even more damp, and the brick's even more, and it's disintegrated behind the scene. It's disintegrated more. And we can hide our faults, but God is trying to bring our faults to the front so he can deal with them. When you cover your faults, they fester, and God he wants to change you. You won't leave here like you came. In Jesus' name. That's what church should be like. You won't leave here like you came. Bound, oppressed, tormented, sick and lame. Because the whole early books of Acts is still the same. And when you come here to church, you should have an assurance, I'm going to change. I've come here for God to do some surgery on me. I've come here for God to scrape off some stuff out of me. I've come here this morning to make a mess at this altar. Let him scrape off some of the wicked that's in me. Get it out of me. Don't look at me like you're not wicked. The Bible says our hearts are wicked. The hearts of a man are wicked, and we can conjure up all kinds of wickedness, and I can as well, and so can you. And so, but I don't want to have that festering inside. I want it to come out, and when I come to church, I'm praying that the preaching and sometimes even the praise and worship. We've got some really rough guys come to the church in Southend just recently. These guys I wouldn't even like to tell you what they do. Swear in church. I said, oh my goodness, what has God brought us into? But isn't that what we want? We don't want people who are perfect, because we're not perfect. We want people who've got problems. And when they come to church, and I'm watching, there's two guys in particular, and I'm watching them, and during the praise and worship, they're in tears. These hardened guys, been to prison, successful guys in the world's eyes, but they're literally weeping because when they come into the presence of God, something starts working on their hearts and inside, and something starts, bubbling inside, and it's like, I just feel like I'm unworthy, and then, you are worthy. God loves you, and he wants to change you. So you won't leave here like you came. We're not trying to make people feel bad, but we're trying to make people better. When you cover up your faults, they fester. And let's be honest, getting out in the open really does help, doesn't it? I came there, sat in that church service, the first time I felt conviction, and I prayed a prayer, and I went down to the altar, and I left all my rubbish at the altar, And I got up and I walked out of church and I felt like a new creation. Because that's what God's trying to do. He's trying to make us into new people. He's trying to change us. I've never really connected that verse before, but when you confess your faults to a friend who prays for you, it is really effective. It's really effective. You know, my job as a pastor, and your pastor, Pastor Alan, their job is not to cast judgments. We're not sitting up and going, right, I'm going to judge that, but look what they've done, I'm judging them. Or even to be the administrators of punishment. I am not a Christian policeman or a judge. It's not my job to catch you out. I'm sure some people think it is. You know, I'm sure some people think I've got a whole bunch of drones, which I do. As people leave church, I attach a drone to you with one of those little Apple tags, and it's like that drone's going to follow you around, and I'm watching these screens at home. I've got more to do with my life than do that. You know, we're not here to cast judgment on you or to even administer punishment. That's not the job of a pastor. The job of the pastor is to enlighten you, to shine the light of Jesus on your life through the Bible and through the Word, that his light might shine upon you, that as the light shines on you, you are changed. It's to advise you how to overcome. We are more than conquerors. We are overcomers. And we're to help you overcome your problems and to pray for you. You know, this might sound a bit big-headed, but I really do believe that pastors' prayers carry some weight. Pastor, would you pray for me? You know, we've seen some incredible miracles. We have a WhatsApp group, which I've just shut down actually because people are hacking it and nicking money off people in the church. It's terrible. But we've got this WhatsApp group, and people say, Pastor, can you pray for this and can you pray for that? And it's like, or the church prays for it. And it's amazing. We have seen some absolutely unbelievable miracles. There's a guy that crashed into a lamppost. Some relative of someone in our church, they gave him a 0.2% chance of living. And we prayed for him. Never met for him, never went to lay hands on him. We prayed for him, and he walked out of hospital about 2 months later. They said he'd be brain damaged, no brain damage. The prayers of friends and pastors are powerful. When you're going through something, phone your pastor. Pastor, would you pray for me? They carry weight. When people refuse to deal with their problems, the problem with that, it starts affecting others. One bad apple spoils a whole bunch. A little bit of leaven leavens a whole lump. And it starts affecting those people around you, and they become unrepentant and keep on doing what they're doing. At some point as pastors, yes, we have to step in and go, I'm sorry, but you know what? You need to stop that behavior. But just one verse earlier in our text, it says, Matthew 7 verse 20 says, therefore, by their fruits you will know them. By their fruits. Only you have the answer to this question, and no one can argue with you about it. Do you have a relationship with God? Do you have a relationship? And when you stand before him, what will he say? Hey, Dave, how's it going, bro? What will he say to you? Or will he say to you, who's this pretender? Why do you pretend like you know me? So many people think they're Christians, but they have no relationship. Do you talk with him? Do you have conversations with him? I can think of many times when, God speaks to me. I remember when I was in South Africa, and it's like we're struggling to get the church going, and we're pioneering, and it's like, it's just my wife and myself and my 3 kids and our dog Max. And he really helped me get the church going, because Max was a stunning looking dog, and people used to come up to him and they said, oh, hang on, you've got an accent, what are you doing here? And that's how the conversation got started. So Max was involved as well. But I remember being at a prayer one morning all by myself. No one else had come out. I'm discouraged. I'm standing there. We don't even have a building to be in. And I remember God challenging me to go over to the middle of a field, and I didn't want to. And I said, God, I'm praying. Leave me alone. Stop bugging me. And God said, no, I want you to go over to the middle of the field. And so eventually, I said, maybe that's the voice of God, like Samuel. God, are you trying to speak to me? And so I went to the middle of the field, and there was nothing there. I thought there was a dead body there. There was nothing there. And I turned around, and I looked back, and God said, what do you see? And I said, I see nothing. He goes, that's right. He goes, you've walked over a field which is full of dew, and there's not even one footprint. I said, wow. He goes, yes, David, you're a lightweight. You're a lightweight. You make no impact. You make no impression. This fellowship isn't paying. I worked it out one day. It cost this fellowship £500,000 to send me and my wife to South Africa to start a church over there. £500,000, and I'm going to sit here and just have a holiday. Hey, my lifestyle changed. I mean, some people that came, some of you, numbers of you came. You know, I had a beautiful house with a swimming pool. It's like I had 2 nice cars. I was living a nice life out there. But that wasn't what I went to South Africa for, and it did. It's a very cheap place to live, and I lived a fantastic life out there. But I went there to start a church. And God told me, he said, you know what, you're not here to change your lifestyle. You're here to start a church. And we did 3 in the end. But God says, you're a lightweight. God spoke to me, and he called me a lightweight. And I stomped all the way back over that field, and I made some impression on the way back. But that wasn't what he was talking about. I got back to my place where I was praying, and I opened my Bible, and it says, every place your foot shall tread, that place is yours. And so God spoke to me through his word. You know, here it is, God's speaking to me. He's directing me, he's guiding me, he's telling me off. He's embracing me, he's loving me. See, that's what it is to have a relationship. And you know what, maybe the reason you don't is because you don't really expect him to talk to you. He so badly, he's sitting at the end of the phone going, come on, phone me, please. Just ask me some questions. Just talk to me. Come on, please. I want to have a relationship with you. And we think the relationship is coming to church. That's not the relationship. That's where we get stirred up. That's where we get challenged. But the relationship comes on the middle of the night when you're lying there and you're looking at your finances and going, what budget? I don't have a budget. My budget is all whack. You know, I got less coming in than going out, and I don't know how to handle it, and I am in debt. And right now, the debtors, and I was foolish because I bought a second house, and it's like, and I remember that day lying there in my bed, just wide awake, and I said, God help me. And I got this vision of this bundle of sticks flying through the air with a hand underneath it. And any moment, they're going to be scattered, and there it goes. There goes my marriage. And if my marriage goes, what's going to happen to my kids? So there goes my relationship with my kids, and this is going to happen, and that's going to happen. I'm sitting there in the middle of the night, and I'm panicking. I'm saying, God, help me. And then God says, look at those sticks, Dave. He said, what do you see? Whose hand is holding those sticks? I said, well, it's not my hand. God says, no, it's not your hand. It's my hand. He said, I hold your life in my hand. I said, God, never leave me and never forsake me. He said, Dave, I will never leave you and I'll never forsake you. And you know, I haven't worried like that ever again because I know I have an assurance that God holds my life. You know, my life isn't down to the bank managers. My life isn't down to my boss. My life isn't controlled by outside circumstances like COVID or whatever else that's happening. You know, I know that God has my life in his hand, and I have a complete assurance that no matter where I go, every place my foot shall tread, that place is mine, is what God told me. And so if God is for me, I remember another time, I was ticked off. Been saved for probably 4 years, got no future wife on the horizon. I'm thinking, you know, this single life is miserable. Saved, and it's like, you know, and I'm vexed. I thought, you know, I'm going to go and watch a film. I went up to London, Coming to America by Eddie Murphy. Went to see that film. Just watching it, it's like, wow, look at this. You know, I thought, I remember standing on the steps outside of that theatre, and I remember saying, wow, I wish I had a dad like Eddie Murphy's, or whoever the guy in the film was. I wish I had a dad like that. Because if I had a dad like that, you know, he was running behind, if you don't know the film, he's running behind the scenes, he's orchestrating everything for his son, everywhere his son goes. He's got bodyguards covering him, you know, he's got people providing, sending money for him. I mean, everything is, I thought, wow, I wish I had a dad like that. And as I stood on the steps of that cinema in Trafalgar Square, not Trafalgar Square, in Piccadilly, no, not even, what was it? That square up in London anyway. I'm standing on the steps and God says, I am your father. And I own all the cattle on 1,000 hills. and I am running behind you, and I am orchestrating things for you. See, I have a relationship with God. And every time I call to him, the problem is I don't call to him enough. Sometimes I forget he's there. And when things are going good, I forget him. And we can neglect him. You know, we have to get into a place where we're speaking to him. Do you have a relationship with God? Because that's what I'm talking about this morning. And when you stand before him on that great day, what will he say? I don't know you. I knew you once, but that relationship is broken. You can tell a lot by someone when you see their friends they have. That's why it always worries me when Christians don't want to hang out with other Christians. I mean, sometimes, to be honest, Christians are boring. Really boring. There's goody two-shoes. Can't even have a laugh. You know, can't even have a joke with them. It's like, and so I can understand sometimes why you wouldn't want to hang out with Christians like that. But you know, when they're saved and we're doing something together, the way I met my wife was going on impact teams. And she used to sing in a band, and I couldn't sing for licks, but I can drive a van, and so I used to drive the van, and Louise used to sing in the band, and you know, we got to know each other by going and doing stuff for God. And that's how our relationship grew, because we'd sit there and we'd have meals with everybody else, and we got to know each other, and we started to like each other because we're doing something for God, and by their fruits you shall know them. Verse 35 says, for I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you took me in. I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you came to me. And then the righteous will answer him saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? And when did we see you a stranger and take you in, or naked and clothe you? Or when did we see you sick or in prison and come to you? And the king will answer and say to them, assuredly I say to you, as much as you did it to one of the least of these, my brethren, you did it to me. Then he will also say to those on the left-hand side, depart from me, you cursed, into everlasting fire, prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry and you gave me no food. I was thirsty and you gave me no drink. I was a stranger and you did not take me in. Naked and you did not clothe me. Sick and in prison and you did not visit me. Then they also will answer him, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or naked or sick or in prison and did not minister to you? Then he will answer them, saying, assuredly I say to you, inasmuch as you did it not to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me. And they will go away with everlasting punishment, but the righteous into everlasting. How you treat people as a Christian is so important. How you treat people in church. How you treat people outside of church. That really is the real test of, are you a Christian? How do you treat people? How you speak to others is a very good indication. You know, you can't get on with God and not get on with people. And the indication of your relationship with God is how you treat other people. Are you always fighting, always arguing? Then how is your relationship with God? Because you know, God says you can't do that. You can't be like this. If you have no compassion, that should trouble you. You have no compassion for anybody. You know, I never cried before I became a Christian. Never. Never, ever. But when I got saved, I remember driving past. I was going to my fiance's house for Christmas, going to pick her up from her mum's, and I remember driving past a graveyard on Christmas Day, and I saw a man standing there all by himself by a grave. And I'm going to enjoy a really great day with family and friends, and I see this man all by himself, and I started to weep for a complete stranger. Because one thing that God put in me is he put compassion for other people. But you have no compassion for anybody. You just start talking to God. So God, why don't I have compassion? Why am I always arguing with people? Why are people always vexing me? You know, it amazes me sometimes how so-called Christians act and treat people. Little groups, little cliques, like we don't talk to you and you don't talk to us. And I know what I'm talking about because I've done that myself. In the bad times of my Christian life and my bad times in my relationship with God, I'll diss people and I won't talk to them. And who are you? And get out of my face. And I don't want to, and you lots of bunch of. But it's always been at times when my relationship with God hasn't been good. And that kind of behavior is a very good indication of where your salvation's at. How Christians position themselves at work. You can't call yourself a Christian and be a lazy worker. You should be the best. You should be a testimony on your workplace. We should be the hardest workers and produce the best results. Christianity should not be in word. Some people have got all the words. I want to tell you about Jesus. And they stand up in their soapbox and they tell you all about Jesus and they tell you all about this thing. And you sinners, you're going to hell. And then you're a bad worker. You know what? You're going to hell. Well, you're not, but you need to be careful. It's indeed, it's how you act. And you know what? If you have no desire to change, this is who I am, this is how I'm always going to be. I have no desire to change. It bothers me when I go for long periods of time and I don't see any area in my life in which I need to improve. That bothers me, when I don't feel convicted, when I don't feel challenged. That troubles me. When I prepare sermons, I'm preparing it before I give it to the church. And it's like, I get convicted. I need to improve. I need to change. One of the indications that God is working in your life is he is challenging you to be different. He's working in you and through you. He is transforming. You're not the same. But if you have no desire to hear from him, and you don't want to be convicted, and you'll do everything not to feel convicted. I hate being convicted, and I love being convicted. I hate it. I don't like the feeling. But you know what I do love? I love what it produces in me. It produces change. And I don't care how old you are. Most people are very stuck in their ways. At 62, we are very stuck in our ways. But I thank God. God is always tenderizing, always softening us. God is always doing a work in us. He's always changing us. And you know what? If he's doing that, you'll never get old. I love what it produces in me. And that's why I read the word. If you're not reading the word, you're lost. We've got a challenge on in our church at the moment, and the challenge is to read the Bible through in 90 days. We did it last year, and I've never seen such growth in the people, not through my preaching, but by individuals picking up the word of God. His word is life. And we're reading it through in 90 days, and then we've got a month off, and then we're doing it another way for 90 days, and then we've got another month off. So this year, hopefully, all the members of the congregation will read the Bible through 3 times. You know what? The change is going to happen for them. Not through preaching. That helps. But when you are in the word and things jump out at you, when was the last time you read the word? I'm challenging you to be in the word. Pastor Linford Henry always used to amaze me. He always had his Bible on me. He always had it on him. He's always reading the Bible. You'd see him, and he'd be there and he'd be in the Bible. He'd be in the word. It's like, you know what? We need to be in the word. Church, you need to be in church, but you also need to be in the word. You also need to be in prayer. You need to be into not neglecting your relationship with God, because God speaks to you through his word. And as you read the word, it's amazing how many times when you're praying, the words you've read come to your memory. And that's how God speaks to you. I never knew you. I pray that not one person sitting here today will stand before God on that great day, and he will say to that, I don't know you. But that's down to you. Do you want to work on this relationship? Do you want to develop that relationship? Do you expect to have conversations with God? Do you expect God to speak to you, not just through sermons or words? I don't give out words. I've given out 3 words in my whole life. Some people love it. I got a word from the preacher. Well, that's great. I'm pleased for you. But it's only good if you do something about it. And most people are more excited about getting the word than actually what the word said. What did the word say? And most time it says, do this, do that. If you, I will. It's all about relationship. And my challenge to you this morning, as I close this sermon off, is if you don't hear anything else, get into a relationship with Jesus Christ. Talk to him. Be bothered when he's not talking to you. Be bothered when nothing's happening in your life spiritually. When you can't get on with other people, look at yourself. Stop pointing fingers. When you point fingers at someone else, you've got 3 pointing back at you and you've got 1 pointing